We continue now at the top of Daf Dalet Amud Aleph from Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 4a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was dealing with the Brisa of Rabbi Chia. The Brisa of Rabbi Chia said that if you have Hadoas Eidim b'mixas, meaning to say, let's say you have a claim of 100 against somebody, and then Eidim testify that the person owes 50, so that's Hadoas Eidim b'mixas. The Eidim are testifying on part of it, so there is a shvua in that case, and it says over there that there's a kal v'chomer. And the Gemara was trying to find what exactly is the kal v'chomer. The Gemara suggested on the previous Amud that the kal v'chomer is from Eid Echad. If Eid Echad is able to make a person take a shvua, so too Hadoas Eidim b'mixas should be able to make a person take a shvua. But the Gemara says that's not a good kal v'chomer because it's talking about two different parts of the claim on which the shvua is being made. By the Eid Echad, you're taking the shvua on that which the Eid is testifying. The Eid Echad is testifying that you owe a certain specific amount of money. You take a shvua on that amount that you don't owe it. By the Hadoas Eidim b'mixas, so there the Eidim testify on part of it, that part you have to pay. You're taking the shvua on the other part. That's what the Gemara now says. Tomar be'edim, whereas you say by Eidim, shal masha kafar hu nishba. He's supposed to be taking the oath on that which he's denying, so you can't learn out Hadoas Eidim b'mixas from Eid Echad. Rashi says, Tomar b'shavua de'edim, you should say by the oath by Eidim, she'eno nishbal ma she'idu, you're not taking an oath rather on what they testify on, el al ma she'lo hidu, it's on what they don't testify on. Ve'al kfiraso nishba, he's taking a shvua on what he denied, v'lo hadosa, not on what they testified, u'minayin lach lahachmer kol kach, where do you have a source that you should be so machmer? So we're still looking for a source that by Hadoas Eidim and Mixas there's a shvua, and we have to learn it again from a kal v'chomer, and the Gemara says, elamar a papa, rather a papa says, asi migilgul shvua de Eid Echad. We learn it from Gilgul shvua, that's the rolling oath, so to speak, of Eid Echad, of one witness. And Rashi explains, mi Gilgul shvua de Eid Echad, meaning as follows. Im nischayev lo shvua al yedei Eid Echad. Let's say a person's already chayev to take an oath to somebody else because of the testimony of one aid, one witness. Kedaminan, as we said. V'haisa olav taina acheres. Now that person who's making the claim, he has another claim also he wants to make against the same person. Shelo haisa mutelas olav shvua. Now really there shouldn't be an oath on that second claim, but there's a concept of Gilgul shvua. We roll into the shvua other things, other claims that are being made. Megalgalin osa im shvua zos, we roll it together with this shvua. V'nishbal shneim, and the person ends up taking an oath on both of them. The Gilgul shvua do raisi, and Rashi says the Gilgul shvua is a concept mido raisa. We need to say it's do raisa because we're learning from Gilgul shvua to this case of Hadoas Eidim and Mixas. So Gilgul shvua is do raisi. The alfinan la b'kiddushin miva amro ha'isha amen amen. We learn it from the woman says amen amen. The idea again that we extend the shvua. Haresha al mashalo ha'ed ha'ed hu mashbiu. You see that which the aid is not testifying on, that's the whole idea of Gilgul shvua. Even what he's not testifying on, there's an oath, and so therefore we can extend that to Hadoas Eidim and Mixas as well, that there would be an oath in that case. But the Gemara says, Ma'ala Gilgul shvua de Eid Echad, but what is unique about Gilgul shvua of Eid Echad, shekein shvua goreres shvua. There you have one oath causing another oath. Tomar be'edim, whereas by edim demamon kamechayvi, there it's not that there's an oath that's causing another oath. They're actually mechayiv the person to pay money on the part that they testify on. Rashi explains shekein shvua goreres shvua, meaning Eid lo chayvo shvua el al mashahayid. The Eid is mechayiv him an oath on that which he testified. V'hashvua goreres shvua, and then one shvua causes another shvua. That's how Gilgul shvua works. Tomar be'edim halala, whereas in this case of the Eidim where they're testifying on part of what is owed, shachamishim sheyidu heim mechayiv mosal shalim. They're not being mechayiv a shvua on that 50. They're being mechayiv him to pay that 50. So you don't have the concept of shvua goreres shvua here. V'ein kan shvua ligrur al yad shvua al ashar. You don't have a primary shvua to cause that there should be a secondary shvua that you make on what is remaining. And so the Gemara continues and says essentially that is correct, but we can learn it out from what's called the tzad hashava. We're going to take two cases and learn out our case of Hadoas Eidim and Mixas. So the Gemara says piv yochiach, the case of admission will prove the other way. Rashi explains piv yochiach, meaning moda mixas hatayna, the classic case of moda mixas, where a person admits to part of what is being claimed. So over there, shal masha kofer, he's taking a shvua on what he denies. Upiv lo hoda, it's not on the part that he's admitting. Hu nishba, that's what he's taking an oath on. So that will prove even in a situation where you don't have shvua, goreres shvua, you have a shvua in that case. But the Gemara says you can't just learn out from piv, as we've said. Mala piv, what is unique by admission? Shekain eno behachasha, there's no concept of contradicting. If Eidim would come and say you don't owe the money, it doesn't matter. Once the person admits he owes the money, he owes the money. But to that we can go the other way. Eid echad yochiach, the case of one aid can prove the other way. Sheyeshno behachasha, there is a concept of contradicting that aid, or mechayiv o shvua, and yet he could be mechayiv the person to take a shvua. Mala eid echad shekain al ma shemeir hu nishba. But again, what's unique by eid echad is he's only testifying on he's only taking an oath rather on that which he testifies about. Tomer be'edim shal ma shekafar hu nishba. Whereas by edim again he's taking an oath on that which is being denied. Piv yochiach, but again the case of admission proves proves the other way, and so we have a classic tzad hashava v'chazer adin. This goes back and forth. Lo roizeh koroizeh v'lo roizeh koroizeh. This one is not like this one, and this one is not like this one. Meaning, eid echad is not like a case of admission, and admission is not like a case of eid echad. Hatzad hashava shebehen. What is the common denominator between them? Sha'al yedei taina ukfira hein boin. That they're both talking about situations of claims and denial. V'nishba, and there's an oath. Afani avi edim. So too I bring a case of edim. Sha'al yedei taina ukfira hein boim. There is a claim and there's denial that is involved, and that's what's happening in this case, v'nishba, that causes the oath. And so therefore again we have this tzad hashava that says when you have hadas edim and mixas that there should be a shvuah. But the Gemara continues, Malat tzad hashava shebehen, what is true about the common denominator, meaning both the case of eid echad and admission, shekein lo huchsa kafran, the person is not proven to be somebody who's a liar. Tomer be'edim, whereas by edim, when you have two witnesses saying essentially the person is a liar, shekein huchsa kafran, it shows that he's a kafran, it shows that he's a denier, he's a liar, and maybe you can't trust him to take a shvuah. Rashi says, lo huchsa kafran means, al masha kafar, eino muchsa kafran, that which he was denying, it's not shown that he's lying about that. Shema lo kicheshoed, eino maybe he's not going to be contradicted. One witness is not enough to be able to really contradict him, and to say that he's considered a kafran. Tomar be'edim, whereas when you have two witnesses against somebody, so there, he's denied everything. And they say that he owes 50, so huchsa kafran, so at this point already he's a kafran, he's considered a total liar. So therefore maybe we shouldn't trust him to take an oath. By the case of an admission where he's admitting to part of it, by the case where you have only one aid, he's not yet a kafran, so we would trust him to take an oath. That might not be true by a case of two witnesses. So how can we learn out again a shvuah by the case of two witnesses? But the Gemara continues with Edim Yehuchza Kafran. But is it really true that by Edim, when you have two witnesses, he's considered to be? It's presumed that he's a Kafran. V'amar Ravidi bar Avin Amar Rav Chisda. But Ravidi bar Avin said that Rav Chisda said, "Hakofer b'milva kashel edus." If somebody denies a loan, he's still kosher to be an aid. But because now if he denies a deposit, pasal edus, so then he's disqualified from being an aid. And Rashi explains, HaKofer b'milva means to say, Bein al kula, bein al mixas, whatever he denies, whether it's on the entire thing, whether it's on part of it, uvo edim vehidu ad shalo nishben. Let's say edim come, and they testify before he took any oath, the edim come and testify that he was lying. So still we say, kosher le'edus, we don't say he's considered a kafran, we say that he's kosher to testify, he can still be an aid. V'lo amin gazlan, who we don't say that he's a gazlan. V'atorah amar al tashas rasha aid, the Torah says a person who's a gazlan, who's a rasha, is not allowed to be an aid, but we don't say that in this situation. Why? The reason is as follows. Since a loan in general is something that is meant to be spent, the person is borrowing money, he's supposed to spend the money and pay back other money. Maybe he needed to spend it. He's just thinking, when I have the money, I'll pay it back. We don't consider a person a gazlan just because he denies a loan, because maybe his intention is to pay it back when he has the money. He's thinking that if he admits right now, then the person's going to claim it from him immediately. And so therefore, in general, we don't say when a person turns out to be a liar by a loan that he's considered to be a kafran, that he's at that level. Now there's a difference by a pikadon, aval kofer by pikadon. If somebody denies a deposit, that's an item that he's supposed to watch. He's not supposed to be spending that at all. Afilu al mixas, even partially, uvo edim, and witnesses come, ve'idu, and they testify against him. Pasal edus, so in that case he's disqualified from being a witness. He is considered a rasha. Why is he trying to delay returning a pikadon? Now maybe you'll say avad mimenu. Maybe you'll say he lost it, and that's why he's trying to delay. And he's trying to delay until he finds it. And so later on we'll say in the parak, there are witnesses that come and testify and say that he did have it at that time it was being claimed. Meaning it is possible to come up with a scenario where a person is delaying by a pikadon, but in this particular case where it says kofer b'pikadon is pasal edus, that is not the situation. But in any case, we see over here that he's not hochsa kafran, so that's not a good refutation from learning out from the tzad hashava. But the Gemara continues, Ella rather parach. He asks as follows on the tzad hashava. Ma'ala tzad hashava shebehen. What is unique about the tzad hashava? Shekein einon b'toras hazam. In both of these cases, you don't have a concept of hazama. That's the concept of kasher zamam. When edim are falsified, you have a concept of hazama. You don't have that in the case of admission. You don't have that by eid echad. Tomar be'edim. Whereas by edim, when you have two witnesses, sheyeshnan b'toras hazama. There's a concept of hazama. There's a concept of falsification in that situation. So you can't learn out edim from the combination of admission and eid echad. Rashi says b'toras hazam. What does it mean Toras hazama? L'shalem knas de kasher zamam. Rashi here is referring to kasher zama as a knas, but the idea is to pay the fine of kasher zama. Kasher zama means what the Edom tried to do. That's what, if it turns out that they're falsified, that's what they have. That's their punishment. That's either what they have to pay or the punishment they have to receive. In general, the halacha is one aid. If there's hazama, there's a falsification of one aid, he's pater. Certainly by admission, there's no concept of hazama. Tomar be'edim, whereas by two witnesses, if they would be falsified with regards to the 50 that they testified about, they would have to pay money. So therefore, again, we see this refutation of learning from the tzad hashava. But the Gemara says to that, Halo Kasha, that's not a difficulty. Rabbi Chia Toras Hazama lo parach. Rabbi Chia doesn't ask questions from the concept of Hazama. As Rashi explains, Toras Hazama lo parach, he doesn't ask questions, he doesn't refute learning from Tzad HaShava from the idea that there's no Hazama in those cases, but there's Hazama over here, means to say, Eina Chashuva lo pircha. That to Rabbi Chia is not considered refutation. Since in Eid Echad there is a concept of falsifying to some extent in Eid Echad, you can be mevatel his Eidos. Beidus shnei Eidim, let's say you have Eidos of two Eidim. If we're going to say by witnesses because of the fact that there's a concept of Azama, there shouldn't be a Shvua, we could say the same logic by one witness that there shouldn't be an oath. So there's at least a concept of Azama by Eid Echad to nullify his Eidos. Maybe there's no kasher zamam, but there's still a concept of falsifying his Eidos. If it's just the reason because he doesn't pay the fine of kasher zamam, that has nothing to do in terms of any strength to trust his Eidah, so to speak, and so therefore that, according to Rabbi Chia, is not a good refutation. And so the Gemara continues, Ela de Kamar Vitana Tuna, rather, what the Gemara here means to say is, rather, if you're going to ask any questions on Rabbi Chia's Braisa, don't ask it from the fact that he learned from a Kal V'chomer, because we could explain that through the Tzad HaShava above. As we said, Rabbi Chia doesn't ask questions from Torah's Azama. But if you're going to ask any questions on the Braisa of Rabbi Chia, ask on the Vitana Tuna. Vitana Tuna was saying that there was a proof from our Mishnah to what Rabbi Chia said. What's the proof from our Mishnah? Because you see there's an Anon Sahadis in our Mishnah. There's an Anon Sahadi, there's witnesses, so to speak, that each person has the talis, because each person is holding the talis, and we say there is a shvua. That shows there's an oath by Hadoas Eidim, and so too over here, if you have Hadoas Eidim b'mixas, let's say you have a malva against a lova, and you have witnesses that are testifying partially to what the malva is claiming, so there should be a shvua. So that idea of Itana Tuna, Midami, can you really compare the two cases? Can you compare the case of Hadoas Eidim b'mixas to our Mishnah? Hasam over there, la malva isle sahadi, la lova lesle sahadi. In the case of Hadoas Eidim b'mixas, so the lender, he has some witnesses on his side that the borrower owes 50. The borrower has no witnesses on his side, the lo masek le v'lo midi. He doesn't have any witnesses saying he doesn't owe anything. Tihavale sahadi lelova, because if the borrower did have witnesses, the lo masek le v'lo midi, that he did not owe anything, lo boy Rabbi Chia l'shtabui. Rabbi Chia would not require him to take an oath then. If the borrower had witnesses on his side, he certainly would not need to take an oath. And so therefore, in our case, hacha over here, meaning in our case of the Mishnah, ki hechi da anon sahadi b'hai, anon sahadi b'hai. Just like there's an anon sahadi, just like we are witnesses, so to speak, with this guy holding the talis, there's also an anon sahadi with the other guy holding the talis, so you can't compare it at all. And nevertheless, in this case, there is a shvua. Clearly, the shvua has nothing to do with the case of Hadoas Eidim and Mixas, because you would never say a shvua by the case of Hadoas Eidim and Mixas if the borrower had witnesses on his side, and so therefore the Vitana Tuna does not make sense, and so the Gemara says you're right about that. Ela rather, ki itmar Vitana Tuna, rather, when was it stated that the Mishnah supports a teaching of Rabbi Chia? Ha'idach Rabbi Chia, it was on a different teaching, it was on the other teaching of Rabbi Chia, Itmar, that's what it was stated on. The Vitana Tuna is not going on the case of Hadoas Eidim and Mixas. We're bringing our Mishnah for the following teaching of Rabbi Chia. The Amar Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia says, Monali biyadcha, if a person says, you owe me a money, you owe me 100 dinar, v'alo amra ein lach biyadi ala nun zuz, and the other person says, I only owe you 50 zuz, v'heilach, and here it is, he gives him the 50 zuz immediately. So chayiv, in that situation, he is chayiv. It's the same as a regular case of modim and mixas, and he has to take the regular shvua of modim and mixas. My time, what's the reason? Heilach nami kim modim mixas atayna dami, because heilach is the same thing as admitting to part of the claim. And on that we say Vitana Tuna, and our Mishnah supports this. It says Shnayim ochzin betalis, two people are grabbing onto a talis. V'hacha, but over here, kevan the tafis anon sahadi demai the tafis heilachu, since he's actually holding the talis, we are witnesses that what is being grabbed, that's heilach, that's as if he's giving it to him, so to speak, immediately. V'katani yishav, and it says he takes an oath, so that's a support from our Mishnah. Even in a situation of heilach, there is a shvua. And Rashi explains, Elo dekamar v'tana tuna, rather, if you're going to ask a question, Rabbi Chia, ask it on the v'tana tuna section, meaning, Elam yeshlach lahashav al divrei Rabbi Chia, if you're going to ask any questions of Rabbi Chia, kach yeshlach lahashav, here's what you should ask. Dekamar v'tana tuna, because he said that our Mishnah supports what he's saying. V'hevi raya l'dvorav v'mishnah seinu midami, and he's trying to bring a proof from our Mishnah, but is there really any comparison to our Mishnah? Hasam b'di Rabbi Chia, there in the case of Rabbi Chia, l'mal ve'islei sahadi, the masik bechamishim, the lender has witnesses that the other guy owes him 50, l'lova leslei sahadi be'ino chamish, she'ino chayev lo aleh. The borrower has no witnesses on the other 50 that he's not chayev, but he have a lake agon ilo heidu edem chamishim chayev v'chamishim para. Let's say there would have been witnesses that testified that he owes 50, but he already paid off 50. B'chia gavna lo amar b'chia detzarch lishav al ashar. Certainly Rabbi Chia would not say in such a case that he has to take a shvua on the other 50. But masnisim, when it comes to our Mishnah, ki hechid anon sahadi lahai, just like we have an anon sahadi for this guy holding the talis, the chetzi shalo, that half of it belongs to him. Anon sahadi lahai, we're also witnesses for the other guy, the chetzi shalo, that half of it belongs to him. V'lam hitzrichu chachamim shvua. Why would the chachamim there require a shvua? Shma mina. So what do you see from the fact that there's a shvua there? You see it has nothing to do with Rabbi Chia. Time alam mishun demod mixas hatainu. It's not because it's mod of a mixas. Rabbi Chia, like Rabbi Chia, ve'ena shvua doraisa. We see it's nothing to do with that. It's not a shvua doraisa. Ela takonas chacham shlo yekol echad holech v'chulu. It's just a takonas chachamim that people shouldn't go around grabbing other people's talisim. And so the Gemara then says, rather it goes on the other case of Rabbi Chia, that's vehelach. Vehelach means to say as follows. Says Rashi, lo hotzeisim, I never spent any of the money. Meaning there's a claim here being made of, let's say, 100 zuz, and the person says, helach, here's 50, meaning I never touched it. Ve'en shalcha b'chol makom shehem. It's yours wherever it is. So chayiv lishav al ashar. So there Rabbi Chia says, even though it's not the same as a classic mode of a mixas, where the person essentially is admitting to owing 50, that he spent the 50, he owes a debt, here he's saying, the 50 is actually present, take it, it's yours wherever it is. So there, chayiv lishav al ashar, still he has to take an oath on the rest. V'lo amrinan hani de kamodi le begavai. We don't say that the 50 that he's admitting about, hoel v'isnu beinayu, since it's present in front of us, so to speak, command the nokil hudami, it's as if he's already holding it. Alakashar modem b'mixas u'v'chayiv. Rather, it's like any other case of modem b'mixas, and we say chayiv. V'tanatuna, and then again, there's a support from our Mishnah for this idea. Kasal gadaydach, right now we think, to Rabbi Chia taima de masnisin, right now we understand that according to Rabbi Chia, the reasoning of our Mishnah is mishum da anon sahadi demai de tafis dilehu, because again, you have an anon sahadi, whatever he's holding is his. V'havalik v'havik kimonali biyadchan. It's like the case of saying you owe me 100. V'halo omer ein lecha biyadi klum. The other one says I don't owe you anything. V'oedem mi'idem oso, and then we have this anon sahadi. Edem are now testifying sheyesh lo chamishim, that there's 50, that he owes him 50. V'chi'idach de Rabbi Chia de mechayiv le'shvua d'oraisa. It's like the case of Rabbi Chia, where there's a shvua d'oraisa. V'hachen over here, the hachaduas edem anon sahadi demai de tafis ha'helachu. This is not simply an anon sahadi that you owe him 50. This is an anon sahadi of helach sharei b'fanenu, because it's right in front of us. V'katani de mechayiv shvua sharon. It says here that there's a shvua. V'hu adin lo da b'mixas. The same should be by mode of a mixas. That was the vitana tuna, and so that's what Reb Chia was bringing the Mishnah for. And the Gemara continues, Rav Shesha Amar, and Rav Shesha says, Helach Potter, in a situation of Helach, again, where he didn't actually spend the money, he says the 50 is yours wherever it is. So in that case, his Potter is not going to be a regular case of mode of mixas where you take a Shvua. My time, what's the reason? Kevan Amar Le Helach, since he says Helach him, he says take it wherever it is. So Hani Zuzi the Kamodi Begavayu, so that money that he's admitting about, Command Nokid Lumal Vedami, it's as if the lender already has that money, Be'ina Chamishim, and then there's just another 50, Holomodi, he's not admitting to that. Hilkach Leka Hodoas Mixas Ataina. Therefore, you don't even have a case of modim and mixas over here. That's according to Rav Sheshes. And the Gemara says, well, Rav Sheshes kasha masnisin. So now, according to Rav Sheshes, our Mishnah is difficult because the proof to Rabbi Chia was from our Mishnah. And the Gemara answers to that. Amalach Rav Sheshes will say to you, masnisin takonas chachamim. Our Mishnah is just a takonas chachamim. It has nothing to do with a shvua d'oraisa, as we've explained previously. As Rashi explains, takonas chachamim v'lo misham hado aseidim, has nothing to do with the anon sahadi, nothing to do with testimony of witnesses. Ukitebarchinon la'el ki yechid anon sahadi lahai. Anon sahadi lahai. It's similar to what we asked before. There's an anon sahadi on both sides over here. It's not just an anon sahadi on one side, and therefore it's a takonas chacham. It's not relevant to this discussion. But the Gemara then says v'idach, now the other opinion, meaning Reb Chia, in takonas chachamim. Yes, it is a takonas chachamim. Umiu, but still we can learn out, because umiu, nevertheless, yamrid b'shlamam midoraisa helach chayiv. If you would correctly say that on doraisa level helach would be chayiv a shvua, so then misakni rabbanan shvua kein doraisa. Then it makes sense to say that the Rabbanan would institute a shvua that's similar to some shvua d'oraisa that we find. But if you're going to say that on a d'oraisa level, halach is pater from a shvua, mesakni Rabbanan shvua d'lesed d'chvasa b'doraisa, you think the Rabbanan would institute a shvua, you don't find something similar in the Torah, that's really Reb Chia's argument. Reb Chia understands that our mission is a shvua midrabbanan, but the shvua d'Rabbanan is always modeled after the shvua d'oraisa. As Rashi explains, the Amr b'shlama halach midoraisa chayiv k'lomer gabe shvua d'oraisa kagon bo'odah b'mixas, meaning again by shvua d'oraisa like modah b'mixas. If you're going to say that there's such a concept on a d'oraisa level, it makes sense to model the d'Rabbanan shvua after that. And the Gemara continues, Meisva, we have the following question, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Dalid Amud Beis.